And this is not just a new occurrence and recently, like some of the occurrences trying to connect H. Holmes, say, to Jack the Ripper. No, this
Mm-hmm.
was back in the day. This is from an article printed on November 19th, 1888, of the Atchison Daily Globe and the Austin American Statesman, both newspapers, had reported a Malay cook running on ocean vessels was a suspect in the Jack the Ripper murders. The newspaper reported that a Malay cook had been employed at a small hotel in Austin in 1885. Furthermore, the newspaper reported that the Austin Reporter investigated a matter calling on Miss Smith, who kept the Pearl House near the foot of Congress Avenue opposite the Union Depot 3 years ago. It was ascertained that the Malay cook calling himself Maurice had been employed at the house in 1885 and had left sometime in August 1886. It will be remembered that the last of the series of the Alston murders was the killing of Miss Hancock and Miss Aluna Phillips, the former occurring on Christmas Eve 1885, just before the Malay cook departed, and that series then ended. A strong presumption that the Malay was a murderer of the Alston woman was created by the fact that all of them, except two or three, resided in the immediate neighborhood of the Pearl House. In London, on the 13th of August, 1888, a sailor named George M. Dodge was interviewed by Scotland Yard. Dodge claimed to have met a Malay cook named Alaska, possibly Lascar, or Old Malay word for sailor, at the Queen's Musical Hall in Poplar, London. He had claimed
Okay.
that Alaska was about 35 years old, 5'7", weighed 10 to 11 stone, around 68 to 69 kilograms, and sometimes carried a double-edged knife, which he showed George. The following is what George claimed. Alaska told him that he had been robbed by a woman of bad character, and that unless he found the woman and recovered his money, he would murder and mutilate every Whitechapel woman he met. Similar to the murders of Austin, all five of Ripper's victims would follow a similar pattern of lower-class women within the radius of Whitechapel. Deep-throated cuts, severe body mutilation, or organs removed, except for the case of Elizabeth Stride. Several witnesses' testimony of sightings of the alleged Ripper talking to Elizabeth Stride right before she was found dead have provided a description of him. One William Marshall claimed the Ripper was a stout man, about 5'6" tall, wearing a black cutaway coat, black trousers, and a cap was something like a sailor would wear. A police constable named William Smith claimed that the man had a dark complexion and a dark mustache, wearing a cutaway coat and dark trousers, carrying a parcel wrapped in a newspaper. A recent immigrant named Israel Swartz claimed he shot at Limpsky at a second man. He had a full face, was broad-shouldered, and wearing a dark jacket and trousers with a peaked cap. Back in Texas, the author of The Statesman followed up on the same lead and tried to connect the Malay cook with London. Before he could reach him, however, he discovered the cook had left London. After that, just like the Austin killings, the Whitechapel killings stopped too.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think with all this heavy breathing?
People even then and now try to connect unsolved serial killers, and I've said this before, that try to connect them together. This is not the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is not. Just because you have one unsolved murder might be similar to another unsolved murder, don't mean they're connected.
Right.
At all. To think that this person had started in Austin, Texas, got out of Austin in the nick of time and went over to London to commit the 5 canonical murders of Jack the Ripper, because there's theories that Jack the Ripper might have started earlier with other murders, because there was a lot of murders going on in the working class part of London.
Right.
At that time and before and even afterwards. But they want to connect the 5 canonical murders with the murders of Austin, Texas. It doesn't fit. It really doesn't fit. Some of the killers were similar, but moving from domestic workers to sex workers, there's domestic workers in London like there's sex workers in Austin at the time. To go
or
from
their
one to
domestic workers who weren't voluntarily involved in sex work, but found
yeah,
themselves, unfortunately, the victims of rape, the victims of all that kind of stuff, and they're in it forcibly.
exactly. Involuntary or voluntary. Um, to go from one to the other, it's just two different MOs.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's the time. What are you talking
Uh,
about the women, or are you talking about the murderer?
the murderer, the modus operandi,
Well, the
the
murderer, I mean, it
how
depends on
they
how
do it.
comfortable. It depends on how comfortable they get, because
Right.
they could get in their feelings. They could feel a little bit more confident.
Mm-hmm.
With sex workers, I know who for real, who's gonna care. But I mean, especially with servants, especially black ones. I mean, he may have regarded them the same in terms of having nobody to look out for them in that way. I don't know.
Right.
I'm not the
It
serial
just
killer
yeah.
whisperer.
Yeah. But looking at the case of if you just like forget or don't look at the murders that happened pre the canonical five of Jack the Ripper or after the canonical five, and you just look at that and you look at the murders in Alston, they just it doesn't. There's no link. I feel there's no link at
Okay.
all. There's more like people try to connect it to. Oh well, H. Holmes. Like there's literally a couple of writers out there just trying to connect H. Holmes to these murders, the murders he did, and around the country, and the Jack the Ripper murders. And again, it's just like no link, none
Right.
whatsoever.
Okay.
There was a program on PBS back in 2014, The History Detectives. They did air a episode on these killings. And they used a combination of historical research and modern techniques, including a psychological and geographical profiling, and they identified a suspect, a man named Nathan Elgin, a 19-year-old African-American cook. Elgin worked in close proximity to the crime scenes and was missing his big toe. That was a little... That's a major because one of the
Missing
victims...
his big toe.
Yes, one of the victims that were murdered. They found footprints outside of the shack, and one of the footprints, you could clearly tell the big toe was missing.
Oh. Okay.
And the history detectives. They were to draw geographically to this person, this cook, 19-year-old African American cook, Nathan Elgin, who was missing their big toe. It was similar. He said it was similar to the footprint believed to be left by the killer. Now, what happened to Nathan in February 1886, shortly after the last murder, Elgin was shot and killed by the police while he was attempting to assault a girl with a knife. This is all listed in historical record. This Nathan Elgin attacked a young girl and was shot and killed by the policeman walking by. So, but they've linked it to these murders. They linked him to these murders.
Huh.
It's circumstantial. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence. I mean, you take it to court, you might not get a conviction, but there is circumstantial evidence with Nathan Elgin and at least one of the murders.
Is there any information about any follow-up that was done with I was a card player in college, so I used the language of any of these possibles. Was there any follow-up with any of these folks by the police?
Yeah, they followed up on 400 suspects. They arrested the one husband. He was exonerated.
Right.
Yeah, they also arrested another man, but he was quickly released because he had a solid alibi. But again, they arrested 400 people. They ended up having alibis or not enough evidence to get against them, and they ended up letting them go.
But did any of these 400 people, were they missing a toe?
No. Michael Elgin was the only one missing a toe. With one of the few set of footprints they were able to find near the crime scene. One of the crime scene. But they never arrested Michael Elgin for it. He was never a suspect in it. He was only afterwards, when the history detectives did some more digging, that Michael Elgin's name came up. Even though one detective did name him after he was killed as a possible, but mostly no.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm. And let's see. One of the a writer, William Sidney Porter, better known by his short story pen name O. Henry, who was living in Austin at the time, coined the term "servant girl annihilators" in the May 10th, 1885 letter addressed to his friend Dave Hall, and later included in his anthology "Rolling Stones." He writes, "A town is fearfully dull," wrote Porter, "except for the frequent raids of the servant girl annihilators, who make things lively in the dull hours of the night."
Okay. Now, I'm reading something interesting about Nathan. There's like a little profile on him, and he's the profile is saying that he could make a he would make a good suspect given his history of I think possible abuse. It looks like they're saying, and all of that kind of stuff. He's got the rage, and he's got the anger, and he's got revenge fantasies and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. This guy is a screwed up.
He seems like a strong possible.
Yeah, he's his information is available strongly correlates to traits associated with disorganized, anger, retaliatory serial killer profile. In anger, retaliatory rape, murder, the rape is planned. Initial murder involves overkill. Is anger venting act that expresses symbolic revenge on a female victim. Next, by poor relationships with women, the aggressor distills his anguish and contempt into explosive revenge on the victim. The aggressive killer will either direct his anger at the woman or redirect his anger at a substitute woman.
Mm-hmm.
He also follows he also has the traits of childhood abuse or neglect, early violent episodes, violent fantasies, resentment of authority, escalation, stressors. Nathan would also possess the locational expertise critical to successfully enacting the murders, including authorities culminating in a distinctive signature killing style. The attack on sleeping female victims using blunt force to the head, carrying the body away from the house into the yard where the victim was then raped and murdered.
Oh.
Yeah, I think this close. I think if you're going to try to pin it, you would need more evidence. But if you're going to pin it on someone with at least circumstantial evidence, I would pin it on Nathan. I would think he's a did it. This guy's a did it.
My vote's for Nathan as well.
Yeah, because he is totally screwed the hell up.
Now, I wonder if we went back in time. If we went back in time as a modern mystery solving duo, and we went back to 1885, 86. We can come up with a cover story. It's everything didn't go to hell immediately.
Right.
After post Reconstruction, we might have still, I don't know, but I think we could have came up with a cover story adequate enough for us to investigate Mr. Nathan.
Yeah,
might have been able to do that, and I don't know. We might have been able to expose Mr. Nathan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would take a little bit.
The most likely candidate. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna take a lot, because anybody could kill us.
Mm-hmm.
Or could try at least. It didn't even have to be step on somebody's shoe.
Yeah.
Negro, and turn around and get popped.
Yeah.
That'd be a heck of a TV show.
Oh yeah. They're going back in time. but they're black.
Oh
Oh fuck,
gosh.
this is not going to end
Right.
well.